Businessman poses as guest to discover manager treating maid like trash. Michael Thompson held the anonymous letter with trembling hands as he walked through the halls of the Malibu Grand Resort, his most valuable property. The handwritten words had haunted him for days. Your employees are being humiliated, and you have no idea what happens when you're not around. That's when he heard the shouting from the main lobby. A man's voice barked words that cut through the air like razors. You incompetent fool! How many times do I have to tell you that towels must be folded perfectly? The man in a dark suit gestured violently at a woman in a black and white uniform. Eleanor Wilson lowered her head as she picked up the towels scattered on the marble floor. Her hands shook so badly she nearly knocked over other items on the cleaning cart. Guests passing through the lobby stopped to watch the awkward scene. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard. It won't happen again," Eleanor whispered without raising her eyes. "Oh, it certainly won't, because next time you're out on the street." Richard Parker pointed his finger in her face. "And look me in the eyes when I'm talking to you." Michael watched everything from behind a column, dressed in plain clothes and a cap that partially hid his face. He had decided to pose as an ordinary guest to uncover the truth behind that letter. What he was witnessing exceeded his worst expectations. Eleanor slowly lifted her face. Michael could see tears glistening in her brown eyes, and something tightened in his chest. The woman looked to be in her 50s, with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, her features marked by a life of hardship. "Now get out of my sight and go do the 10th floor rooms properly, and don't mess up again." Richard turned his back and walked away, leaving Eleanor alone to gather the towels under the curious stares of onlookers. Michael approached the front desk, maintaining his disguise. "Good afternoon. I'd like a room for a few days," he told the receptionist. "Of course, sir. Under what name?" asked the young man, who seemed nervous after witnessing the scene. "David Miller," Michael lied, using a common name. "A simple room, nothing too luxurious." As he checked in, Michael watched Eleanor finish organizing her cart. The woman moved slowly, as if every motion pained her. Other employees passed by without making eye contact, as if afraid to be associated with her humiliation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The room Michael received was on the 8th floor, strategically positioned so he could observe the hotel's operations. As soon as he settled in, he began devising a plan to uncover more about what was happening in his own company. The next morning, he went down early for breakfast. The restaurant was busy, but it didn't take long before he heard Richard Parker's raised voice again. "Eleanor, get over here now." The manager gestured near the buffet. The maid came running, carrying cleaning supplies. "Yes, Mr. Richard." "Did you see the mess left on table 12? How is a guest supposed to sit at a filthy table like this?" Richard grabbed a napkin and rubbed it across the table's surface, showing a bit of dust. "This is unacceptable." "But sir, I just cleaned all the tables 20 minutes ago," Eleanor began to explain. "I don't care. Clean it again, and this time do it right." Richard threw the napkin on the floor. "And when you're done, go check all the rooms you did yesterday. I've had complaints." Eleanor bent down to pick up the napkin, and Michael noticed how her hands trembled. An elderly lady having coffee at the next table whispered to her husband, "What a horrible man. How can he treat an employee like that?" "Better not get involved, dear," her husband replied. "They might have problems we don't know about." But Michael knew. He knew Eleanor was one of the longest-serving employees at the resort, with 15 years under her belt. He vaguely remembered her from the early years, always smiling and helpful. What had happened to bring her to this state? After coffee, Michael decided to discreetly follow Eleanor. She went up to the 10th floor, pushing her heavy cart that squeaked with every move. As she cleaned the rooms, he watched from a distance. She was meticulous, careful with every detail, but she seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. In the hallway, he ran into a young housekeeper who seemed new to the job. "Excuse me," Michael said, pretending to be lost. "Do you know where the ice machine room is?" "Oh, yes, sir," replied the girl, whose name tag read Amanda. "It's at the end of the hall to the left." "Thank you. Have you worked here long?" Amanda glanced around as if checking if anyone was listening. "Only 3 months, but I've already seen a lot." She lowered her voice. especially what happens to Mrs. Eleanor. Eleanor? The senior housekeeper, Mr. Richard. He treats her terribly. Every day it's a new humiliation. Amanda seemed to regret speaking. But I didn't say anything, okay? I can't lose this job. Michael assured her he wouldn't say a word and continued his investigation. As the day went on, he began to notice a pattern. Richard Parker seemed to target Eleanor specifically. While other employees made small mistakes without consequences, any slip-up from Eleanor became grounds for public humiliation. At lunch, he witnessed another uncomfortable scene. Eleanor was in the staff cafeteria when Richard walked in. "What are you doing here?" he asked aggressively. "I'm taking my lunch break, Mr. Richard." "Break? How you think you deserve a break after the mess you made in room 1205? Richard slammed his hand on the table, making other employees stop eating. The guest complained the bathroom smelled bad. "But I cleaned it with all the products, sir. Maybe it's the plumbing." "Don't give me excuses. Get up now and go fix it, and don't come back to eat until it's perfect." Eleanor stood up, her plate still full, and left the cafeteria. Michael saw how the other employees lowered their heads, pretending not to see what had happened. He decided to follow her to room 1205. She walked in with a resigned expression and began cleaning the already spotless bathroom again. Michael knocked on the door, pretending to be a guest. "Sorry to bother you," he said when she answered. "I'm from the room next door. Can I ask if everything's okay? I heard some noises." Eleanor quickly wiped away a stray tear. "Everything's fine, sir. Just doing an extra cleaning." "Have you worked here long?" 15 years, she replied with pride mixed with sadness. "I always loved my job." "And now?" She hesitated, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Now it's different. Mr. Richard took over management 6 months ago and..." She stopped, as if afraid of her own words. "And what changed?" "Everything. He made new rules, punishments. If we make any mistake, he docks our pay. And with me, he's even harsher." Michael felt anger rising in his chest but kept his composure. "Why don't you look for another job?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "Sir, I'm 62 years old. Who's going to hire a woman my age? Besides, I have to support my 3 grandchildren. My daughter, she's no longer with us, and they depend on me alone." Eleanor's words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. That woman was being psychologically tortured with no way out, and all of it was happening on his property under his responsibility. "Do your grandchildren live with you?" "Yes, the youngest is 8, the girl is 12, and the oldest is 15. They're my whole life." Eleanor's face lit up for a moment when she spoke about the children. "They're all in school, very bright. I'd do anything to give them a better future than mine." Michael realized Richard Parker had pinpointed Eleanor's weakness exactly, her financial and family vulnerability. That's why she endured all the humiliation without fighting back. That afternoon, he decided to investigate the hotel's inner workings more systematically. He spoke with employees from different departments, always maintaining his disguise as a friendly, curious guest. In the laundry room, he met an older woman named Mrs. Jenkins who had worked there for over 20 years. "Eleanor is a saint," Mrs. Jenkins said, checking to make sure no one was listening. "She's always been the best employee we've had here, responsible, kind to everyone, never spoke ill of anyone. And now she's suffering terribly. That man is slowly destroying her." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head sadly. "Yesterday she came here crying because he accused her of stealing cleaning supplies." "Stealing?" "Sheer cruelty. Eleanor wouldn't even take a bar of soap, but he said he'd deduct the cost of the missing items from her paycheck." Michael mentally noted this new information. It was clear Richard Parker was creating an atmosphere of terror to force Eleanor to quit. In the kitchen, he spoke with the chef, Anthony, a burly man in his 40s who seemed to have strong opinions about everything. "This Richard guy is a plague," Anthony said, chopping onions with more force than necessary. "He came in here full of crazy ideas, changing everything that's worked fine for years. How so? He cut employee benefits, made up a bunch of absurd rules, and has it out for Eleanor especially." Anthony stopped chopping and looked straight at Michael. Want my honest opinion? He wants her to quit so he doesn't have to pay her severance. Severance? 15 years with the company, man. Imagine what they'd owe if they fired her without cause. But if she quits... Michael understood perfectly. Richard was trying to save money at Eleanor's expense. What he didn't know was that he was doing it to the hotel's actual owner. By late afternoon, Michael witnessed another situation that made him lose his patience completely. Eleanor was in the lobby cleaning the large glass windows when she tripped over a cord someone had left on the floor. She fell, hurting her knee, and some cleaning supplies spilled across the floor. Richard appeared immediately, as if he'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. "What kind of nonsense is this?" he shouted, drawing the attention of all the guests nearby. "Look at the mess you've made." Eleanor was on the floor, clearly in pain, trying to gather the supplies. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard. There was a cord here I didn't see." "There's always an excuse, isn't there?" Richard bent down and pointed a finger in her face. "Get up and clean this mess, and the cost of what you spilled is coming out of your paycheck." That's when Michael couldn't take it anymore. Without thinking about the consequences of breaking his cover, he stepped forward to help Eleanor up. "Are you hurt?" he asked, with genuine concern. "It's nothing, sir, thank you," Eleanor replied, accepting his help to stand. Richard watched the scene with irritation. "Sir, there's no need to worry. It's just a clumsy employee," he said, as if Eleanor wasn't even present. "Clumsy?" Michael felt his blood boil. "She clearly tripped over a wire on the floor. That's not clumsiness, it's an accident. And who are you to tell me how to treat my employees?" Richard turned to Michael with an arrogant expression. At that moment, Michael almost revealed his true identity. Almost. But something stopped him. He realized there was still much to uncover, and if he exposed himself now, he'd lose the chance to understand the full extent of the problem. "I'm just a guest who believes everyone deserves to be treated with dignity," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "Dignity?" Richard scoffed. "Employees who can't do their jobs right don't deserve any dignity." Several guests who had witnessed the scene began murmuring among themselves, clearly uncomfortable. An elderly woman stepped forward. "Young man," she said to Richard, "don't you think you're being too harsh on this woman? She's hurt." "Ma'am, stay out of what doesn't concern you," Richard snapped. The guest was indignant. "How is this not my concern? I'm paying to stay at this resort and I don't want to witness this kind of treatment." Other guests began siding with her, and the situation was turning into a public embarrassment for the resort. Richard realized he'd gone too far and tried to smooth things over. Fine. Eleanor, go to the infirmary and get that knee checked, then come back and finish your work." Eleanor limped away, and Michael discreetly followed. In the infirmary, he spoke to her again. "How's the knee?" "It'll be fine." "I've been through worse," Eleanor replied as the nurse applied a cold compress. "Worse?" Eleanor hesitated, but something in Michael's concerned expression made her trust him. "Last week, he made me carry a cart of wet linens alone from the basement to the 10th floor. Said the service elevator was broken, but I saw other employees using it." "And you didn't complain?" "To whom?" "He's the manager. And even if I did..." Eleanor lowered her voice. "I need this job. My grandchildren depend on me." Michael's chest tightened, imagining this 62-year-old woman hauling heavy loads up the resort stairs, all for the sake of power and pointless cruelty. "Can I ask you something personal? How are your grandchildren handling this situation at home?" Eleanor sighed deeply. "They notice I come home sadder. The oldest, Jason, even asked if he should drop out of school to get a job." Tears welled in her eyes. "Imagine a 15-year-old boy wanting to give up his education to help me. I told him I'd rather go hungry than see him throw away his future because of me." The conversation was cut short when Richard appeared at the infirmary door. "Eleanor, how long are you going to stay here? There's work waiting." "I'm coming, Mr. Parker," she replied, quickly standing. "And you?" Richard eyed Michael suspiciously. "Why are you following my employee?" "Just making sure she was all right after the accident." "What accident? It was just a stumble." "And it's none of your business." Michael realized Richard was growing wary of his excessive interest in the staff. It was time for a change in strategy. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. That night, Michael stayed in his room planning his next steps. He picked up his personal phone and called his lawyer, Mr. Jonathan Hughes. Jonathan, I need you to conduct a discreet investigation on one of my employees, Richard Parker, manager of the Malibu Grand Resort. What kind of investigation? Professional background, references from previous jobs, any labor lawsuits against him. I want everything. Is there a specific problem? I suspect he's fostering a toxic work environment and targeting a specific employee. I need proof before taking any action. I understand. How soon do you need it? As soon as possible. And Jonathan, this is confidential. This is... Not even my secretary can know. After hanging up, Michael decided that the next day he would dig deeper into his investigation. He needed to understand not just what Richard was doing, but why. The following morning, he arrived early for breakfast and chose a table that gave him a view of the entire restaurant. It didn't take long for him to witness another disturbing scene. Eleanor was serving coffee to a couple of guests when Richard approached. Eleanor, did you see the complaint I received about you? Complaint? Eleanor seemed genuinely surprised. The guest from room 923 said you were rude to him yesterday. Michael knew the guest in room 923. He was a very polite man who had even praised the hotel's service at the front desk. He was sure that complaint was fabricated. But Mr. Richard, I didn't even enter room 923 yesterday. The room was occupied with a "Do Not Disturb" sign. Are you calling me a liar? No, sir, I would never do that. But maybe there was some mistake. The only mistake here is me not firing you for incompetence yet, Richard said loudly enough for other guests to hear. Consider this your final warning. Eleanor lowered her head and continued serving the guests, but Michael could see her hands trembling as she held the coffee pot. After breakfast, Michael decided to take a risk. He went up to room 923 and knocked on the door. Good morning, he said, when the guest answered. I'm David Miller, also staying here. Can I ask you a quick question? Of course. Did you have any issues with any staff yesterday, specifically with a housekeeper? The man looked confused. Issues? No, quite the opposite. The service has been excellent. Why? Well, I heard a comment about a complaint. A complaint from me? Absolutely not. In fact, yesterday, I praised a very polite housekeeper to the young man at the front desk. An older lady, very attentive. Michael thanked him and said goodbye, now certain that Richard was making up complaints to justify his humiliation of Eleanor. He went down to the front desk and asked to speak to the manager, pretending to have a complaint. Could Mr. Richard assist me? He asked the receptionist. Of course, I'll get him. When Richard appeared, Michael put his plan into action. Manager, I'd like to file a complaint about an employee. Richard's eyes lit up with interest. What kind of complaint? It's about a housekeeper, an older lady. Ah, that must be Eleanor. She's been causing a lot of trouble lately. What did she do? Actually, Michael changed course. She was exceptionally attentive. I wanted to formally commend her. Richard's expression shifted completely. Commend her? He seemed uncomfortable. Well, I'll make a note of it. You don't seem very pleased with the praise. It's not that. It's just, this employee has had performance issues recently. Strange, she seemed very professional to me. Richard was clearly irritated, but tried to maintain his composure in front of a guest. Well, Mr. Miller, right. Thank you for the feedback. I'll pass it along to the employee. Michael doubted Eleanor would ever hear about that praise, but he had confirmed that Richard was bothered by any positive recognition of her work. In the afternoon, he decided to explore other areas of the resort he hadn't visited yet. In the basement, where the storage and service areas were located, he found Eleanor carrying heavy boxes alone. Need some help? He offered. No, sir. Thank you. It's my job, she replied, clearly exhausted. Isn't this work too heavy for... Michael stopped himself, realizing he was about to comment on her age. For a woman my age? Eleanor finished with a sad smile. That's what Mr. Richard always says. That I shouldn't be doing work that's so physically demanding anymore. And why doesn't he transfer you to a more suitable position? Because he doesn't want me working here at all. Eleanor stopped carrying the boxes and leaned against the wall, panting. He wants me to quit. How do you know that? One of the receptionists overheard him on the phone. He told someone he was going to make the old woman's life so hard she'd beg to leave. Michael felt a deep anger rising in his chest. It wasn't just pointless cruelty. It was a deliberate plan to force Eleanor to give up her labor rights. Haven't you thought about seeking help? Maybe talking to the resort's owner? Eleanor laughed bitterly. The owner? Sir, this resort belongs to a millionaire businessman who probably doesn't even know I exist. Why would he care about an old housekeeper? If only she knew she was speaking to that very millionaire businessman. But every company has HR, a complaint department. Oh, they do. But who's going to believe me over him? He's the manager, educated, speaks well. I'm just an employee with no college degree. Michael realized Eleanor had internalized a sense of inferiority that kept her from fighting for her rights. That was exactly what Richard was exploiting. Can I ask you something? Why do you think he chose you specifically to target? Eleanor was silent for a moment, as if organizing thoughts that had haunted her for months. I think it's because I know too much about how things worked before he arrived, and because the other staff respect me. She sighed. If he can break me, the others will be too scared to question anything he does. Eleanor's analysis was surprisingly sharp. Richard was using her as an example to intimidate the other employees. Have you ever thought about recording the humiliations he puts you through? With what device? I barely have enough money to pay my bills. And even if I recorded it, who'd listen to me? Michael grew thoughtful. Eleanor was right about many things, but wrong about the most important. She had far more power than she realized. She just didn't know how to use it. That night, he received the call he'd been waiting for from Mr. Jonathan Hughes. Michael, I've got some information on this Richard Parker. What did you find? A complicated work history. He was fired for just cause from 2 previous jobs due to workplace harassment. Harassment? Yes. In one case, an employee proved he created situations to humiliate her publicly. The company had to pay a hefty settlement. And the other case? Similar. Always the same pattern. He picks a specific employee and makes their life hell until they quit. Michael felt a mix of anger and satisfaction. Anger for hiring someone with that history, and satisfaction for finally having concrete proof of what was happening. Jonathan, how did this man get hired with that record? Apparently, he left out details on his resume and got fake references. The HR agency you used didn't do a thorough background check. I see. Legally, what can I do? Based on what you've told me in this record, you have grounds for termination with cause. Workplace harassment is a crime, Michael. Great. Prepare the documents, but don't take any action yet. I want to handle this personally. As you wish. But be careful not to expose yourself. This type of person can be unpredictable when cornered. After hanging up, Michael stayed up late planning how to handle the situation. He didn't just want to fire Richard, he wanted him to understand exactly why he was being punished. The next day, he decided it was time to observe the dynamics between Richard and other employees more closely. Perhaps Eleanor wasn't the only victim. During breakfast, he paid attention to how Richard treated the kitchen staff. With the male employees, especially the younger ones, he was polite and even friendly. But with the female employees, particularly the older ones, there was always a tone of condescension. He witnessed a scene that confirmed his suspicions. A waitress in her 50s dropped a napkin on the floor. Richard immediately approached her. Be careful, Martha. This can't happen in front of the guests. His tone was firm but not humiliating like with Eleanor. It was clear she was his main target. Michael decided to test him. He approached Richard with a fake complaint. Manager, I'd like to report an issue in my room. Of course, Mr. Miller. What's the problem? The housekeeper left a wet towel in the bathroom. A wet towel? Richard perked up. Which room is yours? 815. Amanda is responsible for that floor. Richard's eyes gleamed with malice. "I'll handle this right away." Michael followed Richard to the 8th floor, where they found Amanda cleaning other rooms. "Amanda, come here now." "Yes, Mr. Parker. The guest in room 815 is complaining that you left a wet towel in his bathroom." Amanda looked confused. "A wet towel? But I always check." "I don't care about your checks. Go fix it now, and then come back. I need to speak with you." Amanda hurried toward the room and Michael discreetly followed. When she opened the bathroom door and found no wet towel, the confusion on her face was evident. "Everything's dry here," she murmured to herself. "How could—" Michael appeared at the door. "Find any wet towel?" "No, sir. Everything's fine. Maybe it was another room." Actually, Michael decided to reveal the truth. "I made up that complaint." "What do you mean?" "I wanted to test a theory, and I confirmed what I suspected." Amanda looked at him with confusion and a little fear. "I don't understand, sir." "You're a good employee, Amanda. The problem isn't with your work." Before she could respond, Richard appeared in the hallway. "Amanda, where have you been? And you, Mr. Miller, what's this about a wet towel?" "Actually," Michael took a deep breath, "I need to talk to both of you." "Talk about what?" "About how this resort is being managed." Richard grew suspicious. "You're a guest here. I don't understand why you're so interested in the resort's internal affairs. Maybe because I care about people's well-being. Or maybe because you're not who you say you are." Richard crossed his arms. "What kind of guest follows employees around asking questions about management?" Michael realized his cover was blown. Richard was sharper than he'd thought. "You're right. I'm not an ordinary guest." "I knew it," Richard smirked. "What are you? A journalist, an undercover labor inspector?" Amanda watched the exchange silently, not understanding what was happening. "I'm Michael Thompson," he said simply. The name didn't register with Richard at first, but then his face gradually paled. "Michael Thompson, the owner of the resort?" "Exactly." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor widened her eyes, bringing her hand to her mouth. Richard stood frozen as if trying to process the information. Mr. Thompson?" Eleanor whispered. "You're really—" "I am the owner of this resort chain, yes. And for the past 3 days, I've been observing how my employees are treated here." Richard quickly tried to change his demeanor. "Mr. Thompson, what a surprise. Had I known, why didn't you identify yourself sooner?" "Because I wanted to see the truth, and I saw much more than I expected." "Look, sir, if there's been any misunderstanding about my management methods—" "Misunderstanding?" Michael turned to Eleanor. "Eleanor, tell Mr. Parker what you told me about working alone with heavy boxes in the basement." Eleanor panicked. "Mr. Thompson, I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble. You're helping to solve it." Richard realized the situation was slipping out of his control. "Mr. Thompson, Eleanor has had some performance issues. Sometimes it's necessary to be firmer." "Firmer?" Michael stepped closer to Richard. "Is that what you call publicly humiliating an employee? Fabricating false complaints? Forcing her to do heavy work unsuitable for her age?" "I can explain. Can you explain why you specifically targeted the most senior and vulnerable employee to harass? Can you explain why you're trying to force her to resign so you don't have to pay her benefits?" Eleanor took a few steps back, still processing that she'd spent 3 days talking to the resort owner without knowing. "Mr. Thompson," she said in a shaky voice, "you really heard everything I told you?" "I did. About your grandchildren, about your struggles, about how you've been treated here. I heard it all." Tears began streaming down Eleanor's face. I didn't know. I thought you were just a kind guest who cared. I do care, and that's exactly why I'm here." Richard tried one more time to deflect. "Mr. Thompson, I think there may have been some excesses on my part, but my intention was always to maintain service quality." "Quality?" Michael laughed bitterly. "You think humiliating employees improves service quality? That creating an atmosphere of fear makes people work better?" "No, sir, you're right. I made mistakes." "They weren't mistakes, Richard. It was a systematic pattern of workplace harassment. And it didn't start here. Richard paled even further. What do you mean? I know about your previous jobs. I know you were fired for cause twice for the same behavior. Mr. Thompson, I can change. You won't get that chance. You're fired for cause, effective immediately. Eleanor's eyes widened as she looked from Michael to Richard. But Mr. Thompson, Richard pleaded, you can't just fire me like this without due process. I can and I am. Workplace harassment is a crime, and you'll answer for it. My attorney already has all the necessary information. Richard realized he'd completely lost control of the situation. His arrogance gave way to desperation. Please, Mr. Thompson, I have a family, bills to pay. You should have thought of that before psychologically torturing your subordinates. Michael turned to Eleanor. You can give your account to HR. Your statements will be crucial for the case. Eleanor was still in shock. Case? Richard will face legal consequences for what he's done, and you'll be entitled to compensation for emotional damages. But I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. Eleanor, Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. You were the victim of a crime. You're not causing trouble. You're helping bring justice. Richard tried one last desperate move. Eleanor, tell him how you really work. Talk about your mistakes, about... Enough, Michael exploded. You no longer have any authority here to speak to any employee. Take your things and leave the resort immediately. And who will take over as manager? That's no longer your concern. Richard left with his head down, realizing he had not only lost his job, but would likely face serious legal consequences. When they were alone, Eleanor sat in a nearby chair, still trying to process everything that had happened. Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. You need to forgive me for taking so long to uncover what was happening here. Forgive you, you saved me. I should have known sooner. I should have had better systems in place to catch this kind of problem. Eleanor wiped her tears. Can I ask you something? Why did you disguise yourself? Why not come as the owner? Because I wanted to see the truth. If I arrived as the owner, everyone would have acted differently. I'd never have discovered how my employees are truly treated when I'm not around. And now, what will happen to me? Michael smiled for the first time in days. Now you'll go back to working in an environment where you'll be respected and valued, and you'll receive a promotion. A promotion? I need someone experienced and trustworthy to take over as interim manager, someone who knows the resort inside out, who cares about the staff. Eleanor's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. You have 15 years of experience here. You know every detail of how things run, and most importantly, you have the team's respect. But I don't have a college degree. Eleanor, I just watched you give a spot-on analysis of organizational psychology and pinpoint exactly why Richard targeted you. That's not something you learn in school. I don't know if I could... You can, and you'll have all the support you need. Plus, the company will pay for you to take a hospitality management course. Eleanor began to cry again, but this time from emotion. My grandkids won't believe it when I tell them. Tell them life sometimes surprises us when we least expect it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, the changes at the Malibu Grand Resort were dramatic. Eleanor took over as interim manager and surprised everyone, including herself, with her natural leadership skills. Her first move was to gather all the staff for an open conversation. In the main hall, facing housekeepers, receptionists, kitchen and maintenance staff, she spoke from the heart. Everyone, you've known me for 15 years. You know I've always treated everyone with respect and kindness. Her voice trembled slightly but remained steady. Now that I'm in management, I want you to know my door is always open for any problems or suggestions. Mrs. Jenkins from the laundry was the first to speak. Eleanor, we're so happy about your promotion. You truly deserve it. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins, but I want to make it clear that no one here will ever be humiliated or disrespected again. We all have dignity, no matter our role. Anthony, the chef, raised his hand. Eleanor, can I suggest bringing back the full meal system for staff? Richard had cut it. Consider it done. And more, We'll improve the employee cafeteria menu." A murmur of approval spread through the room. The difference in leadership was clear. Michael, watching from a distance, was moved to see how Eleanor naturally fostered an atmosphere of cooperation and respect. His intuition had been right, but not everything was smooth sailing in those first weeks. Eleanor faced challenges that tested her new position. A few days after the meeting, an important guest complained directly to Michael about a situation in the restaurant. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you about your new manager." Michael felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of problem?" "It's not a problem, it's a compliment. I've never seen such personalized and attentive service. Mrs. Wilson handled a situation that could have turned into a big issue with impressive grace." "What situation?" "My wife has severe dietary restrictions. Eleanor personally spoke with the chef, checked all the ingredients, and even had special options prepared that weren't on the menu. She made sure to come to our table to check if everything was all right." Michael smiled with pride. "I'm glad to hear you were well taken care of. More than that, I felt she genuinely cared. It wasn't just professionalism. It was real kindness." These scenes repeated themselves in the following weeks. Eleanor had a natural ability to anticipate needs and solve problems before they became crises, but the real test came when she had to deal with a difficult employee. David, a young front desk clerk, had grown accustomed to Richard's lenient management style toward the men and was testing Eleanor's limits. One busy morning, Michael witnessed the situation. David arrived an hour late, and when Eleanor called him out, he responded disrespectfully, "Relax, Eleanor. Being an hour late won't kill anyone." The lobby fell silent. All the employees present looked at Eleanor, waiting for her reaction. It was a crucial moment to establish her authority. Eleanor approached David calmly but firmly. "David, I need to speak with you privately." Her voice was low, but everyone could sense the seriousness. They moved to a more private corner, still visible to Michael, who watched discreetly. "David, you've been here for 2 years and have always been a good employee. But since I took over as manager, I've noticed a change in your attitude." "A change? I haven't changed anything. You were never late before, and you've never spoken to me disrespectfully." David crossed his arms, clearly pushing the boundaries. It's hard taking orders from someone who was just a housekeeper last week. The words hit Eleanor like a slap, but she kept her composure. "I understand your difficulty, but now I'm your superior, and that needs to be respected." "And if I can't adjust?" Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. "Then maybe it's better to find another job where you'd feel more comfortable." David didn't expect such a direct answer. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being clear about expectations. You can stay here as a respectful and punctual professional, or you can look elsewhere. The choice is yours." "What if I complain to the owner?" Eleanor smiled slightly. "You have every right to speak with Mr. Thompson. I'm sure he'd be interested to hear why you think it's acceptable to disrespect your manager." David realized he had underestimated Eleanor. She wasn't the fragile victim Richard had created. Fine, I'll behave." "I don't just want you to behave. I want you to be the professional I know you can be." In the days that followed, David completely changed his attitude. The way Eleanor had handled the situation, firm but respectful, impressed not only him, but the entire team. Michael, who had observed everything, called Eleanor for a private conversation. "How did you feel handling David?" "Nervous," she admitted, "but also determined. I realized if I didn't set boundaries from the start, I'd lose the team's respect." "And how did you decide on the approach you used?" Eleanor thought for a moment. "I remembered how I felt when Richard humiliated me in public. I didn't want to do this to anyone, but I also couldn't let the disrespect slide." "Perfect. You found the balance between firmness and dignity. Mr. Thompson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you really believe I can do this? Sometimes I wake up at night afraid I'm dreaming." Michael was moved by Eleanor's honest vulnerability. "Eleanor, in 3 weeks, you've shown more managerial competence than many professionals I've known. And you know why? Why? Because you understand that leading people is about caring for them, not controlling them." Eleanor smiled, but there was still uncertainty in her eyes. What if I make mistakes? You will. Everyone does. The difference is, you'll learn from them and become even better. As the weeks passed, Eleanor grew more confident and implemented changes that completely transformed the workplace. She created a feedback system where employees could make suggestions anonymously, set up monthly meetings to discuss improvements, and most importantly, fostered a culture where mistakes were seen as learning opportunities, not reasons for humiliation. The results quickly reflected in guest satisfaction. The hotel's online reviews improved significantly, with many comments specifically praising the team's warm and personalized service. But the most significant transformation was in Eleanor herself. The timid, constantly fearful woman had given way to a confident and respected leader. At home, her grandchildren noticed the change immediately. "Grandma, you're different," remarked Jason, the eldest, during dinner. "Different how?" "Happier. You don't come home crying anymore." Eleanor was moved, realizing how her suffering had affected the children. "It's true, Grandma," said Megan, the 12-year-old. "Now you come home smiling and telling us good things about work." Peter, the youngest, simply walked over and gave his grandmother a tight hug. "I like it when you're happy, Grandma." That night, Eleanor called Michael. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you at home." "It's never a bother, Eleanor. What's wrong?" "Nothing bad. It's just my grandchildren mentioned how different I am, happier, and I wanted to thank you for giving me back my dignity." Michael felt a lump in his throat. "Eleanor, you always had dignity. I just helped you remember it." "Can I tell you something? I was thinking of giving up. Not the job, but life. I thought I wasn't good for anything anymore. And now? Now I feel like I have a purpose, that I can make a difference in other people's lives like you did in mine." After hanging up, Michael reflected on how this experience had changed not just Eleanor, but also himself. He realized he'd grown too distant from his business, losing touch with the reality of those who truly made it work. He decided to implement the undercover owner system in all his resorts, visiting them periodically without revealing his identity to see how employees were treated. But first, he had something important to resolve. 3 months after taking over as interim manager, Eleanor was called to a meeting in Michael's office. She arrived nervous, thinking this might be the end of her time as manager. "Eleanor, have a seat. I need to talk to you about your future with the company." Eleanor's heart raced. "Mr. Thompson, if I did something wrong..." "On the contrary, you did everything right." Michael smiled. "The results of these 3 months have been exceptional. Employee satisfaction is up, guest reviews are excellent, and there's been an overall improvement in the workplace environment." Eleanor breathed a sigh of relief. "So I can stay on as interim manager?" "Actually, no." Eleanor's heart sank. "I can't keep you as interim because I want to offer you the permanent position of general manager, with all the benefits, competitive salary, and a permanent contract." Eleanor stayed silent for a few seconds, processing his words. "General manager, permanent. That's right, you've proven you have all the necessary skills for the role." Eleanor began to cry. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me. You earned this position on your own merit." "Can I ask you something? Aren't you afraid I won't be able to handle it? After all, I'm still learning so much." "Eleanor, leadership isn't something you learn just from books or courses. You have something that can't be taught: genuine empathy and the ability to inspire people to give their best." "What about the hospitality management course you mentioned?" "It's still happening. In fact, you're already enrolled to start next month. You'll take it in the evening so it doesn't interfere with work." Eleanor wiped her tears and assumed a more professional posture. "Mr. Thompson, may I make a few suggestions to further improve the resort?" "Of course, I'm eager to hear them." "I'd like to implement a training program for all staff, not just about work techniques, but also customer service and teamwork." "Excellent idea. Go on." "I also thought about creating an Employee of the Month recognition system, not just for individual performance, but for collaboration and helping colleagues." "Very good. Anything else?" "Yes. I'd like to establish a partnership with a local technical school to offer first job opportunities for young people in the community." Many of our employees could be mentors. Michael was impressed by Eleanor's broad vision. These are exceptional ideas. You have my approval to implement them all. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I promise you won't regret trusting me. Eleanor, can I confess something? You've already exceeded my expectations. In fact, you're teaching me important lessons about leadership. How so? You've shown me that truly knowing your business means knowing the people who work in it, and that the best investment an entrepreneur can make is in the well-being of their employees. In the months that followed, the Malibu Grand Resort became a case study in human management. Eleanor implemented all her ideas and more, always with Michael's full support. The training program was a success, with employees feeling more valued and prepared. The recognition system fostered a culture of collaboration where everyone helped each other, and the partnership with the technical school brought fresh energy to the team, with motivated young people learning from experienced staff. But the most significant change was in Eleanor herself. The woman who once feared speaking up for herself had become a respected and admired leader. One day she received an unexpected visit. Amanda, the young housekeeper who had been one of the first to support her, knocked on her office door. "Mrs. Wilson, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Amanda, come in, sit down. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us. I'm the one who should thank you for your support from the beginning. It's more than that. You inspired me to go back to school. I started a night course in business administration." Eleanor smiled proudly. "That's wonderful. How is it going?" "Hard but rewarding. And you know what? Other employees got motivated to study too after seeing your example." "My example? Of course. If you could go from housekeeper to general manager, why can't we grow too?" Eleanor was moved to realize her journey was inspiring others to pursue their dreams. 6 months after taking on the permanent role, Eleanor faced her biggest challenge. The Malibu Grand Resort was about to receive a visit from a group of international investors who were considering a partnership with Michael Thompson's company. The pressure was immense. The success or failure of this visit could impact the future of the entire hotel chain. "Eleanor," Michael said a few days before the visit, "I know this is a huge responsibility, but I trust you completely. I'm nervous, I admit it, but I'm also prepared. What's your plan?" "I'll show them the best we have, our team. I won't try to impress them with excessive luxury or artificial formality. I'll show them the genuine warm service our staff provides." "Perfect. That's exactly what sets us apart from the competition." On the day of the visit, Eleanor personally orchestrated every detail. From the warm welcome upon arrival to the presentation of the hotel's facilities, everything was designed to highlight the human factor. The investors were impressed not just by the infrastructure, but especially by how seamlessly and harmoniously the team worked together. During the closing dinner, the leader of the investor group made a remark that stayed with Eleanor forever. "Mr. Thompson, in 20 years of visiting hotels around the world, I've rarely seen a team so well led and motivated. Your manager is exceptional." "Thank you, Eleanor is truly special. It's not just professional competence, it's how she treats people. I've observed over these 2 days. From the security guard to the head chef, everyone shows genuine respect and admiration for her." After the investors left, having signed the partnership that same day, Michael called Eleanor for a conversation. "Eleanor, you were perfect. That presentation was one of the best moments of my business career." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, but the credit belongs to the whole team. It's exactly that humility that makes you such a great leader." "Can I confess something? Today, during the presentation, I remembered how I felt when Richard humiliated me, and I thought, I'll never let anyone go through that again." "And that's why you transform lives, Eleanor, not just your own." At that moment, Eleanor realized her journey had been much bigger than just a professional promotion. She had discovered her own strength and was using it to empower others. A year after taking over as manager, Eleanor surprised Michael. She organized a thank you celebration at the hotel, bringing together all the staff, some special guests, and even former employees who had resigned during Richard's management and now wanted to return. "Everyone," Eleanor said into the microphone, "when Mr. Thompson gave me this opportunity, I thought I was only changing my own life, but I've learned we were changing many lives. Applause filled the room. I want to thank each of you who believed in me, supported me, and taught me. Because leadership isn't about giving orders, it's about serving. And that's what we do here every day. We serve each other and our guests with care and dedication. Michael stepped up to the microphone. Eleanor, the day we met, you told me you thought the owner of the hotel wouldn't care about an old maid. Today, I want to say publicly, you're not just an employee I care about, you're an inspiration. Mr. Thompson, let me finish. You've taught me that a person's worth isn't in their position, but in the character they show, and that true leadership comes from the heart, not from power. Eleanor began to cry, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. And there's one more thing, Michael continued. I just got confirmation. Our hotel has been voted the best in customer service in the region, and the credit is all yours. The celebration lasted into the night, with staff, guests, and even suppliers celebrating together. It was the perfect representation of the culture of unity and respect Eleanor had created. At the end of the evening, when everyone had already left, Eleanor and Michael stayed talking in the now quiet lobby. Mr. Thompson, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. What did you learn from all this? Michael thought for a moment. I learned that sometimes we need to be humiliated to find our humanity. I learned that a company's true success isn't measured in profits, but in the dignity it offers the people who work there. And I learned, said Eleanor, that no matter how many times life knocks us down, we can always get back up and start again. Eleanor, can I confess something? That anonymous letter that brought me here. Yes, I never found out who wrote it, but I'd like to thank that person. Without it, I might never have discovered what was happening. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then smiled mysteriously. Mr. Thompson, sometimes the people who save us are closer than we think. What do you mean? Sometimes the victim finds a way to save themselves. Michael's eyes widened. Eleanor, did you write the letter? I was so desperate. I didn't know what else to do, so I thought, what if the owner knew? What if he cared? Eleanor lowered her eyes. Of course, I never imagined you'd come in disguise. Michael was moved to realize Eleanor had found the courage to seek help, even when all seemed lost. Eleanor, you didn't just save yourself. You saved all of us. You saved me from being a businessman who didn't know his own company. You saved the employees from a toxic environment. And you saved yourself by discovering your own strength. And the best part, said Eleanor, looking around the lobby, which now stood for dignity and respect, is that we proved kindness always defeats cruelty. That respect always overcomes humiliation. And that sometimes, Michael added, the person we least expect might be exactly the one destined to lead. 2 years after that first undercover meeting, Eleanor had become one of the most respected managers in the hotel chain. Her management methods were studied at other locations, and she was often invited to speak about compassionate leadership. Her grandchildren, now teenagers, had become a source of pride, not just for her, but for the entire community. Jason had earned a scholarship for engineering, Megan stood out as one of the top students in her school, and Peter had developed a passion for hospitality, inspired by his grandmother. The hotel had become a benchmark not just for service, but for social responsibility, offering job opportunities and training for people in vulnerable situations. And Richard Parker. After losing the labor lawsuit and being forced to pay compensation to Eleanor, he never worked in hospitality again. His reputation preceded him, and industry leaders had formed an informal network to avoid hiring people with a history of workplace harassment. One Sunday afternoon, Eleanor was at home preparing lunch for her grandchildren when she received an unexpected call. Hello? Eleanor, it's Amanda. Hi, Amanda. How are you? Great, really great. Remember when I told you I was studying business? Of course. How are your studies going? That's why I'm calling. I was just promoted to supervisor at the hotel where I work now, and I wanted to thank you for inspiring me. Eleanor was touched. Amanda, that's wonderful. You deserve it. But there's more. Remember those methods you used? Treating people with humanity, valuing employees. Yeah, I'm implementing all of that here, and it's working perfectly. You didn't just change the Malibu Grand Resort, you're changing the entire hotel industry. After hanging up, Eleanor felt deeply fulfilled. She realized her transformation had created a ripple effect, inspiring others to seek more humane forms of leadership. That evening, during dinner with her grandchildren, Jason made a comment that perfectly summed up the entire journey. "Grandma, remember when you used to come home crying every day?" "I do, sweetheart. Now we see how strong you are. You've always been strong, right? You just didn't know it." Eleanor smiled, looking at those three young faces who represented her greatest motivation. "You know what I learned, Jason. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about always getting back up. And sometimes, when we rise, we discover we can fly." At the end of the night, while tidying up, Eleanor found an old photo of herself as a housekeeper, still in her early working years. She gazed at the image of that young woman, full of dreams, who could never have imagined the journey ahead. She picked up a new photo frame and placed it beside a recent picture of herself as general manager, surrounded by the resort staff. The two images told a story of resilience, transformation, and triumph. She placed them on the living room shelf where her grandchildren could always see them. She wanted them to know that no matter how hard the path, it's always possible to start over and earn the respect we deserve. Before bed, she said a silent prayer of gratitude. She thanked God for the courage to write that letter, for Michael's disguise that allowed the truth to come out, and most of all, for the chance to prove to herself that she was worth far more than any cruel person could make her believe. The end. So what did you think of this incredible story of perseverance? Eleanor proved that age is never a limit to starting over and that dignity always triumphs over cruelty. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been in a similar situation? How would you react in Eleanor's place? And what did you think of Michael's decision to go undercover to uncover the truth? Leave a like if this story moved you, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one. Your participation means a lot to us.